using the rest of the world, especially pitting China against Russia, and in the Obama administration, there's a lot there. It wouldn't take much for something like this to occur, and it's worth noting, if nothing else.
For Americans, is there anything in your mind that we can do to help?
For Americans, we have to practice self-government. If I would say anything, I would say go to the library, go online, and the first thing you should do is read out loud the Declaration of Independence. Tell me if that doesn't make sense today, as it did then. Just replace King George with the Federal Reserve. Tell me if it doesn't make any sense. Start there. Remember who you are. That's the birth certificate, the Declaration of Independence. It's all about remembering who you are and then getting fired up and saying, you know what? Yeah, we've got to do something, because our generation, we cannot drop the ball. We cannot saddle our children and our grandchildren with a horrible socialism that infallibly will move into fascism, corporate fascism. We just simply can't do that. It is unconscionable for us to just do nothing. We have to do something, because future generations will be livid with us if we don't do something. And this is our time to basically set things right. And again, I want to stress, this isn't really so much about the government as it is the program. And the program is running over the entire world. It's just right now, in order to set up a global world government, we're at the target. America is in the crosshairs. And, we need to create our own crosshairs and focus them back on them.
You've said that this conflict over Earth is being very well managed by both opposing forces of ETs, the benevolents and the regressives. What do you mean by this?
Well, we don't see any of it. We don't see the open warfare or the clashes that are occurring, simply because it's being so managed that it's out of our sight. Some of it is actually taking place on a higher dimensional frequency that we don't actually see it. But there have been incursions into third density, that we are in fact aware of, which is why there have been recovered crashes, because they've been shot down. So it's being well managed, both sides, so both sides can do what they want to do, and at the same time we're being allowed to move in a specific direction.
Okay, now I got a tough one here. We're not trying to contradict anybody else's belief system here. We're just speaking about the Andromedans. But according to the Andromedans, in our ancient past, Earth was moved by the Pleiadians. How did they do this? And why is this important? And also, why is it so controversial?
What is so controversial?
Well, the concept that the Pleiadians are imperfect, that they've made mistakes in the past.
Well, they've all made mistakes. That's called growth. That's called maturity. You don't know the right things until you've done the wrong things. You don't know the path until you've experimented with different logic, different ideas, different philosophies, different methods of implementation of thought and creation and worship. That's what life was created for. That's what physicality was created for, was to experiment, to enrich our lives with experience, and to worship the extraterrestrials as our ancestors did in the very, very ancient past. It would be stupid. It would be the wrong thing to do. And the reason for that is this. Yes, they have incredible technology. Yes, they have enormous wisdom about space, about life, and there's a zillion things they could teach us. But they have gotten there the same way we're getting there, by making mistakes. That doesn't mean they're gods. That doesn't mean you bow down and you worship them. They have made their mistakes, And in many of them, they're still making mistakes. Now, the reason you've asked the question, obviously, is that the A's have been somewhat critical of the mistakes the Pleiadians have made in the past here on Earth. And one of the things that they have said to me was that the reason they're involved now is to help the Pleiadians step up, that they have an obligation to right some wrongs, that the situation that we're in because they did not fulfill a promise after Atlantis to protect Earth. They didn't do it.
The Andromedans say that Earth was moved by the Pleiadians. Why would they do that? Let alone how could they do that?
Oh, that isn't difficult to do. I mean, it only takes several very large motherships where you form a grid around the Earth, and you can literally use the gravitational field and pull it or move it forward. And that isn't difficult. Solar systems are built today by extraterrestrial races. They can do that. They can, bring moons that are just floating out in space and put them around planets. They can move planets closer, further. They can take an ice planet, move it closer to a star so that the ice melts and now there's water. They can do all kinds of things. This type of engineering, planeteer engineering, I don't know that there's actually a word for it, can be done and has been done. And it's the same here with Earth. There was a point where we were actually too close after a direct hit with another planet, and they were able to move it further away from the sun, which was a good thing. Okay, so this can be done, and that in itself was not necessarily a mistake. Okay, the mistake that many people make is that they think that because these extraterrestrials can come 100 million light years, 140, 230, 600 light years across the galaxy to Earth, that they have to be all-knowing and omnipotent. Absolutely not the case. It's just simply not the case. I mean, look at our own hidden space program. We know it exists, and they have remarkable technology. And they have probably, in all realistic, have tried to leave the solar system and could leave the solar system to travel to other stars. We have the technology, the Montauk information, the star chambers information. We have enormous technology that we've reverse engineered. But it's one thing to have the technology. It's another thing to have spiritual wisdom. And that's where we're really in trouble here, is we don't have the spiritual wisdom to know how to use these tools. And we're like new kids on the block who get that brand new Stingray bike, and the first thing we do is run through the intersection, with it. Cars hitting the brakes and horns blowing and, people screaming, watch out, because we don't know what we're doing, And this is where it creates problems for other races, especially, Rick, especially when you look at the Earth herself and you look at all the issues that are going on Earth that we just simply don't want to resolve. We refuse to resolve. And here we are going to just leave Earth and take that energy. They don't want any part of that. There's no place for that. They've already been through this. They don't want this They don't want this kind of insolence out there. Okay? There's no place for it. And we have a place in the galactic family, but we have to also know that place. And knowing that place takes a tremendous amount of introspection. Really genuinely looking at ourselves. Let's go back to some of the things that were said very early in the contacts. Before the A's actually decided to intervene, there was a great deal of discussion regarding Earth within the Andromedan Council. Now, that is where a lot of planetary systems meet. It isn't run or owned